Hey friends, welcome to this video, the death of SQL or the death of SQL. Well, is that the case with ChatGPT and other large language models? Well, let's try and figure that out. For that, I actually used my local SQL Server instance. So I have here a Microsoft SQL Server, and in here I use SQL Server Management Studio, and there I have a few tables in here. And one of them is the DBU orders table. So if I use this and say select top 1000 rows, so a simple select statement with all the columns, then I get here the data. And now if you are dealing with databases or you work in the analytics field, then you probably often need to write SQL statements. And the question is that really the case also in the future, and now of course with the large language models? Well, for that, I actually tried to connect to this local SQL Server instance, and then of course use the large language model, in this case ChatGPT, and ask some questions and figure out whether it can answer those questions. So the base idea is actually that we ask our questions in normal, human language, right? And then this question gets transformed into a SQL query, sent to the database, and then returns the result. This is the general idea behind that. So is that possible? And does it work? Let's figure that out. So as you can see, I have here a table, and for instance, I have various information here, and there, for instance, is one which is, I think it's called customer country in my case. Here it is, customer country. And now, if I would like to figure out, for instance, how many different customer countries do I serve with my products, right? Which would be some kind of select distinct customer country and so on, SQL statement. Now, these kinds of things. So let's do that using, in this case, Python. So let me just close this for now. And then let's actually import LangChain. In this case, we need LangChain utilities, which is a different package as far as I know. So say from LangChain.utilities. If you have not installed it, you need to install the package first. I want to import the SQL database, this one here. And then from LangChain, in this case, underscore experimental, then of course .sql. I want to import the chain, because here we also have already a chain which is provided by LangChain. So the SQL database chain, this one here. So this just means that we can actually create an instance of a SQL database and then use the chain in order to send our query, so our prompt, to the database. Now for that, of course, we need to have the database URI, or the URI. So db is equal to, in this case, SQL database. And you see by default, and that's what also I found in most of the examples, you have something like this. So you connect to a SQLite database. However, a SQLite database is actually just, most often some kind of in-memory database or local database. And I mean, it's not really used in production, at least from my point of view and as far as I know. So I was more curious to actually connect to the database which I have locally hosted, which is a SQL Server. And a Microsoft SQL Server database is actually used in probably most of the companies. Maybe they have an Oracle database, but the principles would be the same. So the general idea is to try out a real database, to actually realize whether this is possible and usable and feasible in a real world scenario. So instead of using the SQLite database, I'm going to use the connection string. So from my local database, so from URI. And then, of course, I need to now specify the path. So I already have this. So let me just copy it for now. And then I paste it in here like that. Okay. Here we go. So you need to specify your username and your password. And of course, you could also use some kind of, variables, define them. Then, of course, import them with a config parser or anything like that. So you don't need to hard code them here directly in the path. Just mention this, right? Because in the production, you don't want to do this. So, but for now, that's just an easy way. So I'll just paste it in here. And now I have my database connection string. Of course, my SQL Server is running, as I've shown you. So if I go back in here, it is already currently running on my local computer now, so I can actually query it. So for that, I need some kind of large language model. In my case, I'm going to use OpenAI. So I say from .env, I want to import load.env to load my API key. And then from langchain.llms, in this case, I'm importing OpenAI. So to use ChatGPT, but of course, you could also try out, for instance, an open source model, right? There are also plenty of them, like Llama, the new Sapphire model, and so on. So let me load the .env file, and then let's actually instantiate the LLM. So LLM is equal to OpenAI, and then you can specify the temperature and also whether you want to output something in the console. We specify to true, so we can really see actually the SQL statement. So that's why we set propose to true. And the temperature to 0, because I really want to have a deterministic answer. I want to know exactly when after my question, give me a result. I don't need any, creativity from ChatGPT here. So finally, of course, we can create the chain. So say db chain is equal to, and now we use a SQL database chain from LLM in this case, and that's the method. And then we specify the LLM, we specify the database, and also we're both true. That's fine. And then finally, of course, we can run it. So db chain dot run. And now, of course, here in this case, we need to specify now our query, our prompt. So for that, as I said, let's actually use something like go in here, and what do we have? As I said, we have here, for instance, customer country. So there's a column which is called customer country, and I want to know how many distinct customers I have, for instance, or customer countries I have. So let's say, as an example, how many distinct, and then customer country are in, and then what's my table actually named? It's called, orders TBL. So let's call this orders TBL. And that should be actually the chain. And let me just save it for now. And then let's actually open a terminal. So go a new terminal here. Let's run the query. Let's go in here and say, in this case, Python, and then jet SQL.py. So let's run this and see what we get. Now it's running the SQL query. It's transforming this into a SQL query. And you can see that there's our chain. And it's called select count distinct customer country from orders TBL. And the result is 20, and then we get an answer. There are 20 distinct customer countries in orders TBL, which should be correct. And of course, now you can also write additional SQL statements. You can also try out a little more, let's say, advanced ones, if you join tables together and so on. So of course, this is all up for, let's say, testing purposes. But the general idea is, as you can see here, we just ask our question in Norman style, and then this gets transformed into a SQL statement. So there's no need for us to write this then on our own. And that's it for this video. This is, or the question I raised here, is this the death of SQL? Well, I mean, that needs to be seen, but for now, that's really a very interesting, use case for large language models like OpenAI to just really query data. And even if you're not that familiar with SQL, you can now query and start actually querying databases just using your normal question language, right? So that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If so, please give this video a like. Also, if you have not done so far, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks a lot for that. If you want to see more, just let me know in the comments. And as always, hope you see you in the next video. Until then, best guys.